As 10 scale is making a move to either indoor carpet tracks, temporary tracks, or in some cases outdoor astro or dirt tracks, and with the 10 scale IFMAR Off-Road Worlds taking place this year, I feel like now would be a good time to talk about the two premier classes of 10 scale in today's world. Even though they're both 10 scale classes and both are the premier classes like I just said, 2wd drive and 4wd drive buggies tend to be very different in a few different ways. In this video we'll be talking about those differences and determine which one you should go for if you have a choice. Before we begin, I'd like to thank this channel sponsors A-Main Hobbies, Peach State Hobbies, Cal RC, and RC Trophy Chasers. Anything you guys purchase using the links or codes in the description below will directly support me as well. With that out of the way, why don't we begin with 2wd drive buggy. Now, this isn't a history video per se, but some context is needed to understand the classes as a whole. 2wd drive buggy as we know it now has been around for a little while, and by a little while I mean about as long as off-road racing has been a thing, even though it wasn't always called just 2wd drive buggy. For a little while in the class's infancy, especially in IFMAR, it was just called stock, as the cars were limited in terms of brushed motors, and I think the cars could only be modified by a certain amount, though I'm not 100% sure on that second part. Over time, this attitude began to change, and the idea of running a 2wd drive and 4wd drive buggy as distinct classes became more popular, though 2wd drive buggy would be the main premier class for a long time. 2wd drive buggies we race today can be traced back to the 80s with various Tamiya cars like the Hornet and Grasshopper, and of course the associated RC10 2wd drive off-road buggy, which arguably kicked off the 2wd drive buggy racing craze in the mid to late 80s, at least here in the United States. Various other 2wd drive buggies at the time, like the Kyosho Scorpion and Schumacher Cougar, at the time would vary greatly in terms of design and philosophy, but they did have some similarities. For one, most 2wd drive buggies of this era and many eras past this would be rear motor, rear wheel drive. Now, I am aware that there were certain conversion kits and hop-ups back then that could turn your, say, RC10 into a mid-motor conversion, or even a four-wheel drive car with cables, but generally speaking, the majority of buggies from this era were RR configurations. Moving forward a few decades and many different iterations of the design, including different transmission designs like the Stealth transmission for the RC10, differential designs like the ball differential from Schumacher, chassis materials from graphite in the JRX2 to aluminum with the RC10 to plastic with the B2 and electronic layouts of plenty, we would eventually end up with the TLR 22 in 2011. The 22 was a major shift in two different ways. For one, it came with an aluminum pan chassis that you'd see on many 8-scale buggies and a few 4x4 vehicles of the same era, and the advent of a mid-motor configuration out of the box. Now, it is important to note that the 22 could still be built as an RR configuration, but the fact that it could be built as an MR buggy set the precedent for the foreseeable future. Pretty much every single 2wd drive buggy since the 22 has had a mid-motor design with an aluminum chassis to keep the weight as low and centralized as possible. Making an extremely long story short, we've had revision after revision of the 2wd drive buggy design as power increased and tracks became grippier. This led motors to being moved further and further forward over time, leading us to today's 3-gear laydown transmission and many 5-gear transmissions as well, from aftermarket companies like Wheelspeed and first-party companies like Associated and X-Ray. Moving on to the benefits of 2wd drive buggies as a whole, if you have access to a 10-scale friendly track and are more on a budget, 2wd drive buggies are definitely more budget friendly if you want to learn racing. 2wd drive kits on average are about $200 cheaper than 4wd drive ones, not including electronics of course. Also, because 2wd drive buggies tend to be cheaper, you'll also see more 2wd drive buggies at 10-scale friendly tracks in many places around the world. In fact, in some places you will only find 2wd drive buggies, but we'll get to that point later. 2wd drive buggies also on a loose track like you'll see in the Upside Down, some outdoor tracks in the US like Hobby Haven in Iowa, or the Barn in Barnesville, Georgia, and some cork floor tracks in the UK. Running a 2wd drive buggy will absolutely make you a better driver. Think of it like being thrown into the deep end of a pool or lake and not knowing how to swim. After a few tries, you're gonna get it eventually. Things like throttle control and setup knowledge are paramount to success in 2wd drive buggies on low grip tracks. Conversely, if you run on a higher grip carpet or AstroTurf track, 2wd drive buggies tend to be much easier to drive than their 4wd drive counterparts due to the lack of front grip, making the cars much less twitchy. Lastly, because there are less moving parts in a 2wd drive buggy, they tend to be much easier to work on and harder to build incorrectly from box instructions. Overall, they're just easier to understand. 2wd drive buggies aren't completely without fault, however. For starters, there's the aforementioned difficulty of driving them on a loose surface. Yes, running a 2wd drive buggy on a low grip surface will make you a better driver, Much like being thrown into the deep end of a pool without learning how to swim will eventually make you learn how to swim. But here's the thing. Not everyone enjoys the learning experience of almost drowning over and over again until they figure it out. Conversely, driving around in circles and spinning out every corner is also not a fun experience. For those who enjoy RC for the simple fun of it and want to be able to just put their car down with the right tires and just drive it, well, 2wd drive isn't really for you if you're on a lower grip surface. The other issue with 2wd drive applies more if you run mod, but can apply if you run stock as well. And that's that if your setup isn't on point, even on an extremely high bite track, the buggy simply will not drive well at all. This of course applies to things like diffs, shocks, and springs, but also extends to roll centers, camber gain, and other more obscure things that are harder to learn. So you better buy that Invisible Speed book, otherwise you'll struggle on the track. Then again, you probably should buy the Invisible Speed book anyway. Overall, 2wd Buggy is a really good starting point for those looking to get into 10th scale if you have the right mindset going in, and if you want to save a few bucks. But if you have the wrong mindset going in, or want an easier driving and setup experience, 2wd drive probably isn't the best starting point for some. Moving on to the 4wd Buggy, there's been a decent amount of history behind how they've been run and designed. Most original 4wd Buggies from companies like Yokomo, Schumacher, and a few others were designed to use either belt drive or in some cases, even chain drive. There was also the original MIP conversion for the RC10 that was used in the IFMAR 10 scale off-road worlds that used cable drive, but I'll go over that another time. There are many different revisions of the designs of 4wd Buggies over the year, but they only became really more relevant in competitive RC space once stadium trucks became a little bit less popular and when something was needed to fill the void. You had J Concepts also release their own 4wd Buggy, which was pretty successful and started making 4wd Buggy more popular in the 2000s, but the credit of pretty much pioneering the design of 4wd Buggies as we know them today goes to X-Ray and their XB4. If you look at pretty much any 4wd Buggy that isn't a Schumacher as of the time of this script being written, every single one of these buggies has the exact same layout with some differences between them in steering geometry here and there. To the untrained eye even, some of these cars can look like they come from the same manufacturer, just with different colors. Like I said, the only exception worth noting for this is the Schumacher Cat L1R, but even that is more likely going to change after this year's Worlds in the Upside Down. You have the battery on the back right of the car, the motor on the back left, the center diff or slipper clutch in the middle depending on the surface being raced on, the electronics on either side and front of the center diff, including the servo which is usually put on the front right of the car. Copy and paste this from the XB4 to the Team Associated B74 or soon to be 84, the TLR 22X4, pretty nice actually, the Yokomo MO Master Off-Road, and most other 4wd Buggies I've yet to mention. Like I said before, there are some differences between them, but generally they all follow the same layout. Moving on to the benefits of running 4wd Buggies, they are much more versatile than their 2wd drive counterparts and much easier to drive on loose surfaces. You can drive a 4wd Buggy pretty much from indoor carpet surfaces to outdoor loose dirt surfaces. Yes, you can drive a laydown transmission 2wd Buggy on a loose surfaces and do well with the correct setup and tires, but it's much more fun with a 4wd Buggy. All you really need to do is add a center diff, lower the diff heights, and change out your springs and sway bars and you realistically should be good to go. You don't even really need optimal tires as 4wd drive will get you over most obstacles and give you a decent driving experience as well. I won't get too much into the science of why 4wd drive gives you more grip, but all you really need to know is that most successful rally cars are all-wheel drive for a reason. Thing is though, there are some downsides to running 4wd drive buggies, and once again this comes down to grip levels. It's a bit weird to say, but the higher front grip a 4wd drive buggy has, the harder it becomes to control. If you look at a few different 4wd drive buggies that run on carpet, you'll see people doing some pretty extreme things to front tires to reduce their front grip. Things like removing knobs on the front tires, supergluing the sidewall, and even part of the contact patch of the car tire itself, like what came with Brett's buggy. This is all in an effort to make the front end of the car calmer and easier to drive, and also just to avoid traction rolling. The other main problem with 4wd drive is their cost. To put it simply, 4wd drive buggies now cost what an 8th scale buggy would cost about 4 or 5 years ago. And because of this, they tend to be a little bit less popular at a lot of clubs. Also, because they're more complicated than 2wd drive buggies, they tend to be a bit harder to understand and work on compared to a 2wd drive buggy. Overall, if you have a deep enough pocket and are willing to learn more complicated builds, 4wd drive is for you. If not, then I completely understand. Thing is though, For most in the 10th scale space, they tend to run both classes at most big races for one simple reason. They are distinct cars that drive very different from each other. I think that's kind of why I like 10th scale so much. Compared to 8th scale, where you have Buggy and bigger Buggy to an extent, each class in 10th scale has its own unique flavor that's worth exploring. Short course truck is rubbing and racing type fun, stadium trucks are extra stable, 4-wheel drive has the most mechanical grip, and 2-wheel drive requires the most mechanical skill on a low grip surface. Point is, they both have a place in RC racing, and I really hope they're both here to stay for at least a little bit longer. Speaking of which, I'd like to thank you for sticking around this long in the video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to hit the like button and sub to the channel if you'd like to see more. I'd also like to thank my active patrons Michael Williams, RC World Discord server, Dave Armstrong, Rob Bedingfield, Caden Merks, Ian Petrie, Jeffrey Kunz, Shane D. Ruth, Gable Barber, Freeman Racing Team, and of course my channel members, Jeffrey Kunz again, RC Trophy Chasers, Ralisk86, Claymore RC, Ryan G, and especially Morrison Watt. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.